Well, on the programme today, I'm pleased to be joined by two eminent guests. David Bentley Hart is an author, a theologian, a philosopher and a cultural commentator, and recently won the Michael Ramsey Prize for theological writing at the Hay Festival here in the UK. But he's from the States himself, and the book that he won that for is Atheist Delusions, and the subtitle of which is The Christian Revolution and Its Fashionable Enemies. We'll be hearing about David and about why he wrote that book very shortly. In conversation, though, today with David is Terry Sanderson, spokesperson for the UK's National Secular Society. And today they're going to be looking at the subject, is the post-Christian age of secular enlightenment an atheist delusion? That's what we're going to be asking today as we get into today's show. Hope you enjoy it as much as I'm going to, and we'll be giving you ways to get in touch a little later. Well, gentlemen, thank you both for being with me on the programme today. And perhaps as a newcomer to the show, it'd be good to talk first of all to you, David. Congratulations, by the way, on winning this prize. Were you surprised to be nominated? Were you surprised to win it?
Well, yes, surprised to win it at least. I'm often nominated. I'm usually the bridesmaid, not the bride. I tend to think that there can be a somewhat acerbic edge to my voice in print that means I'm usually playing the role of the bitter herbs at the Seder rather than the lamb, So, and very pleased, both because the prize bears the name of someone I very much admire and because I have great esteem for the current Archbishop of Canterbury as well. And the money's nice.
Well, I was going to say, yes, that can't be bad either. You say you're sort of have a slightly acerbic quality. I'd say that's what struck me upon reading the book, is that obviously the rhetoric of the New Atheist is one of the stock in trade of some of the writing there, of Hitchens and Dawkins and Harris, etc. But you're not afraid of delivering a little bit of rhetoric yourself, alongside obviously the well-researched parts of the book. I mean, do you feel that it's a good thing sometimes to trade a few of those sort of rhetorical flourishes and that sort of thing?
Well, I don't know. I'm from Maryland, so like many Marylanders, I was raised with I was force-fed H.L. Menck in school through much of my youth. So it could just be a bad habit. But I don't think it's a bad thing. I think that they certainly have no objection to entering into the fray with both fists flying and doing it in a certain, I hope, a spirit of good fun, even if it gets a bit rough at times. Even so, the title of the book isn't actually my title. The subtitle was my original title, so the editors seem to have added just a little, felt they could go just a little bit farther.
Yeah.
The book a little bit more provocative, if possible.
And I'd say that, in a sense, the book does go further than the title as well, because you're not just responding to the new atheism. You're really making a case for the way that Christianity has shaped current culture, and the kind of debt we owe to it, and whether we can be sure of the future if we sort of abandon it merrily, as some would be wont to. Before we get into that discussion, though, tell us a little bit about your own background, David. Has Christian faith been a part of your story for a long time? Well, I
was raised a Christian. I've never not been, so I can't claim that I ever had a great conversion experience. I didn't come in, out of the rain. Yes, in that sense. But it's not always been a glib or certain sort of faith. There have been long periods of sincere doubt and rejection, and even today, I don't know if I would be regarded as perfectly safe and orthodox in the eyes of all of us.
Well, I mean,
but that's the world I come out of.
Sure.
Not the world I entered into.
Sure. The book itself, this first chapter or so, is certainly a reaction to what you call the gospel of unbelief. And you do take to task the way that certain new atheist writers like Sam Harris and Richard Dawkins and Hitchens and Daniel Dennett have treated the philosophical arguments for Christianity, the historical sort of story of Christianity. What's your main problem with the way that writing has come about these days?
Well, let me. As I suppose the first step, I should point out one of the things I think is slightly misleading about the title of the book as finally published is that it gives the impression that I'm taking atheism as such to task, which is never really the issue in the book. The reason I point to the new atheists is that they seem to me to represent something new in Western secularist discourse, simply in that the books are so remarkably bad, but also so remarkably evangelical in tone. At a philosophical level, there's not one of those books in the current New Atheist canon that's estimable or even worth a moment's consideration, and that's true, strangely enough, even of the books written by, say, a trained philosopher like Daniel Dennett. And I came to the conclusion that there really wasn't much interest in producing serious arguments in those books, and certainly not arguments of the magnitude or care that earlier skeptics and atheists worth considering had made. So I realized from an early point, I think, in writing, and I used them as a foil, as you may have noticed in the book. They're not actually the central concern of the book. That to me they represent more a sort of pathology, and I'm using that word not in an opprobrious sense. I just mean that they're symptomatic of a certain state of mind, a certain popular discontent with faith, a certain set of often received and vulgar misconceptions about Christian history, and the question that then I want to ask is, why is this, and what is it that they think they know about the past? What is the history that they're talking about? And how well they understand. But I soon take leave of them in the book.
Yes, and it's fascinating to read some of the various chapters and the sorts of historical points of view you deal with, those who have written histories of Christianity and the misconceptions that you feel have been sort of gone into popular thought, really, and you deal with things like the Crusades and witch trials and heresy and the church and science sort of thing, Galileo and all the rest of it. A fascinating read, I found it. Today, though, we were going to sort of focus down a little bit on the area that our other guest sort of represents here in the UK, which is secularism, though he might contest exactly what that is. And Terry, thank you very much for joining us today. Terry, you're a spokesperson for the UK's National Secular Society. Do you feel the new atheist writings, are they a good thing for what you're doing? Do you seek to distinguish yourself from that kind of genre of literature? How do you respond to those writings?
Well, I think they make an interesting and even valuable contribution to the debate that's arising about the resurgence of religion. And I think that it's necessary for there to be some balance in the debate, and they provide it quite clearly. Not that I'm presenting myself here as a foot soldier for Dawkins and Hitchens and Dennett and so on. My own philosophical position is one of complete indifference. I don't really care whether there is a God or whether there isn't a God. It makes absolutely no difference to me whatsoever, and it doesn't actually make any difference to anybody else either. So I will go the other way and say that the theology that your other guest, David, is promoting is equally meaningless. It has no basis in reality. And that's all I care about, really. I'm a materialist in that sense. But, the idea that theology is going to answer our questions about the big issues like is there a God and what happens after we're dead and what's the meaning of life and so on, these are questions that theologians constantly struggle with and never find the answer, because really they're not questions. There isn't an answer.
Well, that's your point of view, isn't it? I suppose that's the very question that's being sought to be asked. Is there more to this life than the physical universe we see around us? And obviously many people feel there is. Is it not just your view?
They feel there is. And that's what faith is all about. It's about what they feel should be right.
Well, that's
but you know, I'm not going to get into the Dawkins argument.
It's interesting though, because one of the little bits in the book, David, that struck me, in fact, to the extent that I got on my Twitter stream and tweeted it, was a little statement you made about materialism, which you said is neither a deduction of logic or a fact of experience. You said it is a purely I think something like materialism is a subjective prejudice, something like that. I mean,
a metaphysical prejudice.
What's your basic? Because obviously Terry's just said words to the effect that, as far as he's concerned, you're the one who's going on feelings and that sort of thing.
Well, I think, with all due respect, he has absolutely no idea what I'm promoting or not promoting, or exactly what theology does or doesn't do. Certainly, the tradition of theology is not interested in the sort of questions that he just raised. Those are usually
that's quite true, but there
philosophy of religion. But anyway, materialism. I mean, here we're entering into what would potentially be several hours of philosophical debate, because that is actually more my field. I'm not really an historian. I'm something of a dilettante in that regard. But materialism is not in any way a view of reality that can be justified from experience or from first premises. If what your other guest is saying is that he simply has, to his mind, no reason to assume anything beyond what his physical senses tell him, I don't know if that in practice can be carried out. I don't believe that's true of anyone in practical terms. But fair enough, if he's just describing sort of the agnostic limit of what he's willing to posit or not posit. But there is actually a long philosophical tradition, and there's at present quite a lively philosophical debate about these things, which you have to know and master and understand before you can say whether it possesses content or not. And so simply to say it's not about anything, or as if one knows because of, I don't know, some memory of Sunday school lessons or something, what it is that's at issue, I think is a little bit problematic. The materialist point of view, I'll go further, I'll say this, and again, alas, this isn't one of my philosophy seminars, well, not alas, actually, they're very boring, but I will go further and say that of all possible metaphysical pictures of reality, the materialist one is the most rationally incoherent, the one that ultimately requires the greatest leap of pure faith, because it cannot actually be reduced to first principles that hold together. But again, my reason for believing that is
I mean, we have talked about this, and I would urge people who want to explore this area to go back in the podcast and look for those sorts of discussions. But obviously, Terry, David has a different point of view from you on that, so that rationalism itself is hard to justify in a purely materialistic worldview. But we're not here to discuss that, and I didn't want to drag us too much off topic today, because we're really here to talk about secularism. And why don't I start off with a quote from the book? This comes at page 106 in my copy, at least. You write this, David, there. You say, "We now live in the wake of the most monstrously violent century in human history, during which the secular history, on both the political right and political left, freed from the authority of religion, showed itself willing to kill on an unprecedented scale, and with an ease of conscience worse than merely depraved. If ever an age deserved to be thought an age of darkness, it is surely ours. One might also be tempted to conclude that secular government is the one form of government that has shown itself too violent, capricious, and unprincipled to be trusted." Well, let's go to Terry first of all. What do you make of that account of where society, freed from the compulsion of religious sensibility or religious moral values, leads us?
Well, we're finding out now because, yes, I agree that the 20th century was